Let's talk about how we're going to get Glenn Jacobs ready for this. It's in the Observer. Glenn Jacobs is no longer wrestling as Diesel, but instead as Doomsday with a Lord Humongous mask, closer to his Unabomb gimmick as Big's bodyguard in the USWA. At one point in the show, Christopher broke a guitar over his head and he didn't sell it. They ended up doing a stare down with Doomsday and Mabel, and for reasons I'm not clear of, Jacobs has been working Louisville as Unabomb, but the rest of the cities on the circuit as Diesel. This is something I didn't know until we did research for this. Was this to try to get the real life Glenn Jacobs comfortable wrestling with a mask and performing with a mask? Because I imagine that's a lot different if you've never done it before. For a big guy trying to pull that air and move it around and see, and what's the thinking here?
Well, he had been doing it. He had been doing it in Smoky Mountain as a Unabomber with the hockey mask, and that was actually the look we were thinking of doing for him.
The hockey mask
was that type of mask, but then it was like, no, we need to kind of customize it more and just make it different, because anybody can get a hockey mask and paint it red or do whatever you want to do. But that was the look, and so he had been doing that, and it covered him up enough. Then we saw, well, we'll add long sleeves and a glove and everything else, but only one side was burnt. I think we left. Yeah, originally we had I think we had him with one arm out on the original.
If you're watching along with us over on YouTube at somethingtowrestle.com, you see that Dave Silva has thrown up one of the action figures that have been made in recent years. And one of these early iterations of KANE that very briefly was around was a KANE with a cape. There's a pretty famous photo of him and Paul Bearer coming down to ringside, I think at a live event, maybe at Madison Square Garden or somewhere in the Northeast, where he's rocking a cape. I know that you've had fun talking about the $1 million man wearing a cape at the jewelry store, and Vince McMahon had a cape. And why do you think the cape concept didn't last with the KANE character? Did you like the cape?
I did like the cape. I just didn't think that KANE needed any outerwear to take off before he worked.
Yeah.
I just thought, come out, be KANE.
That look of the red and the black, it's such a cool look. I mean, we've even seen people sort of mimic it and pay homage to it at Fashion Week. I mean, people really like this red and black design. I know Creative Services is whose drawings we're looking at over at somethingtowrestle.com right now, but you created this entire backstory. Were you also involved in the look as far as the black and red and all that?
Yeah, as far as all the initial iterations of it, giving them feedback on what we saw and how we saw him, and it was the fire theme was a big part of it as well. The fire theme, because he had perished in a fire allegedly, was a big part of who this character was, because we kept with the story. Man, there was a fire. There was a fire that killed his parents. There was a fire that really damaged his little brother. His little brother just didn't pass. So that's where really the red and black came from. It kind of reminds you of fire.
Yeah.
And it was evil in its tone. So, yeah, they were perfect colors for KANE.
We've spent a lot of time just brushing with broad strokes on this show before, saying things like Creative Services. Is there anybody in particular that you really clicked with and meshed with you'd like to give a shout out to? Somebody you would look back and say, man, I really enjoyed working with him. That dude really got me. He spoke Bruce. He understood what I was saying.
They were all great. They were headed up at that time. Debbie Bonanzio, and Debbie was awesome.
There's a discussion that happens in the newsletters where it said something like this by mid-July. Apparently, the WWF has gone to a Hollywood studio at great expense and had a mask made that looks like a real-life burn victim, to the point it's not even supposed to look like a mask. You still got to figure Glenn Jacobs as the best bet for the role. Do you remember that? Is that nonsense, or did you try different versions of a mask that maybe would have included something that looks like a burn victim?
Oh, we looked at a lot of different things. I think to try and pull it off as if it was, not a mask and do it like a burn victim was not something that we looked at seriously because we wanted to cover him up. That was the idea. It was a shame that I'm ashamed of the way I look. I want to cover myself up. Don't look at me because I'm hideous. So I don't recall ever doing anything to try and get a mask like that made.
Once you guys know that you're going to be moving forward with KANE and you're going to do this with Glenn Jacobs, do you bring him up and go through, hey, here's the way we need you to work? I know that sounds silly. I'm not saying like, here's how you do a headlock takeover, but like he moves differently. Like you want him to have, you don't want him to wrestle like fake Diesel. You need some movements that have some connective tissue to the Undertaker. Are you involved with that process as well? Did you have a vision for, the way he would turn his head and all that stuff? Or you guys just work through that together, or talk me through that?
He kind of worked through it. We talked about changing it up, but all of the discussions were mainly focused on aggression and just an intensity about him. So the rest of that was just a work in progress. It was constantly a work in progress. The puppy dog head, where he'd tilt his head and just kind of look at you, had so much expression. To be able to get that much emotion and expression from a guy in a mask that big, that's talent. And it says something too to the backstory, because you could read his eyes and you wondered what's going on in there in that one eye. So it was a work in progress. It was a constant work in progress that like that, don't like that, keep this, throw that away. And as with all great talent, you have to get through it.
SaveWithConrad.com. My name is Doug Gustafson, and we are from Columbus, Ohio. First learned of Conrad through his podcast network. I'm a big 83 Weeks fan. Probably got into a little bit more credit card debt than what we wanted to during the course of the pandemic. We wanted to get rid of some of that. My wife and I had luckily bought the house many years ago and had quite a bit of equity built up in it. We are looking to actually redo our bathroom, things around the house that we wanted to do with the other equity that we have left over. We've been talking about refinancing forever, and I finally just took the plunge and called the number, got a hold of him, and from start to finish, it was just fantastic. I had Diane within the day. The communication with her was fantastic. The process moved quicker than I could have ever hoped. My name's Doug Gustafson from Columbus, Ohio. I ended up saving $800 a month with Save with Conrad, and am able to also update our bathroom.
NMLS number 2129, Equal Housing Lender.
SaveWithConrad.com.